Okay, so I was not expecting to make this video nearly as soon as I'm actually making it. I was rather surprised yesterday when I pulled up the Discord and I found out that they just announced the new upcoming Russian spec, the Russian Guard specialization. Now, I think this is when they say guard, I think they're referring to things like Russian National Guard. Excuse me. Rather than something like a guards unit. I kind of want to call this the Russian National Guard, and I will in this video, but I'm probably not going to title the video that way. I'm probably just going to use Russian Guard in the title, because that's what the specialization is called. But I'm going to refer to it as Russian National Guard, to avoid getting it mixed up with Guards Tank Battalion. Tank Brigade. Whichever. Anyway. During July's Slytherin Next event, which I did not know was on, we revealed the upcoming Russian National Guard specialization, set to arrive later this summer. Now, at time of recording, this is a little bit less than 2 months of summer left, so this DLC is going to be coming fairly soon. The new spec brings together elite infantry units, powerful fire support and AA systems, as well as reserve infantry and diverse armored vehicles, creating a versatile fighting force capable of handling a wide range of battlefield roles, while expanding Russia's arsenal with new tactical options. They've also excited to announce their partnership with Faceit, which I had to Google these guys. Apparently they're in esports. Apparently it's related to esports. I can't think of the right word. Anyway, I digress. Share more details about the first official Broken Arrow tournament and competitive circuit. In case you missed the event, you can watch the full showcase here. Twitch channel. The DLC will be released very soon. In the meantime, stay tuned. More updates and new features are coming before launch. Additionally, the game will be discounted by 15% from July 22nd to July 28th. Anyway, Russian spec. So, about the content, as conflict escalates, a new Russian spec becomes available, combining experienced infantry, modern artillery, advanced air defense systems, and massed armored vehicles. The internal troops expand the Russian arsenal with powerful new tactical options. Take command of a brand new force across 2 new maps and 2 dedicated scenarios. The Russian National Guard DLC includes the new Russian National Guard specialization for Russia, 8 infantry squads with 20 unique weapon loadouts, 31 new ground and air units, 2 new maps, 2 new scenarios involving the new spec, a new AI army for skirmish, which I think by AI army they just mean like how if you boot up a skirmish match you can only... Here, let me demonstrate. How if you boot up a skirmish match, you can, the other team only has, 1 spec at their disposal. I think that's what they're talking about. Okay. Anyway. And the new hangar theme. New Russian specialization of the Russian National Guard combines elite security formations, reserve infantry, armored vehicles, and powerful support assets into a versatile fighting force capable of adapting to a wide range of battlefield roles. Deploy Rosvardia, which is... You've got Rosvardia, Bars, Reservists, Spetsnaz Alpha, FSB Snipers, Border Guards, and Spetsnaz Vamprel. At least I think that's how that's pronounced. Supported by reconnaissance vehicles, armored transports, heavy artillery, and modern air defense systems. Now, I think Rosvardia is kind of like National Guard / police. I'm not entirely sure how they work. Bars, if I'm not mistaken, is like a sort of reservist / volunteer organization. Reservists. We actually have reservists in game. For example, there are reservists in the game, or at least there is a reserve unit. You actually get to control them in the zombie scenario, and I believe the infantry, Russia. Nope, that's the U.S. I want Russia. Thank you. Here we go, reservists. And it's not much. Honestly, their vision is not great. Weapons are not great. They have a PKM, which is literally doing only 60 PS. They got their hands on one smoke grenade. So. It's actually a point. Go to the US. Where is the 1200? Where is the actual reservist team? 1200. Huh. Okay. Anyway. Alright, I forgot. It doesn't like to do that when it's loading. Come on. Thank you. So you got Rosvardia, you got Bars, you got Reservists, you got Spetsnaz Alpha. And I have a nagging suspicion these guys are basically the equivalent of something like Delta is in game. Or at least I think that's how they'll be used in game. Spetsnaz Alpha is more like a combination of, well, like Delta Force in real life, but they also do a lot of internal work, so it's more like a combination of Tier 1 Special Forces and then the CIA's Special Activities Division, at least to my understanding. FSB Snipers, I'm not familiar with them. Border Guards, I'm also not familiar with them. And then Spetsnaz Vampirel. And I know they're kind of like Spetsnaz Alpha, but I'm not entirely sure what the distinction between the two is. Anyway, filling the ranks. Expand your battle group with an extensive arsenal of reservist Russian equipment with some modern surprises. Outmass the enemy by... I love the way this is phrased. Outmass the enemy by pressing endless T-62 and T-72A tanks back into service, alongside Tiger, BPM-97, Typhoon K, and the unmanned Uran-9. Now, these three are basically just like different MRAPs. Deliver devastating fire support with the 2S-43 Malva, which, to my understanding, is basically the same gun as on the 2S5. The same long barrel 152mm gun as on the 2S5. I need mech. Where is the toss? Where's the toss? Not the toss, I need the 2-pin. This thing. It's basically this gun, but it's on a wheeled chassis. At least to my understanding. The 9K512 Uragan 1M. Now, the thing about the Uragan 1M is that apparently, at least to my understanding, you can mount either 12 300mm rockets or 15 220mm rockets, if I'm not mistaken. So I wonder which one we're going to get, or possibly both. The 9K58 Comma, which I think is basically just like half of a Smirch, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be upgraded to basically being half of a Tornado S. And the TOS 2, which is basically just like a wheeled version of the TOS 1. While protecting your forces with layered air defense systems including the Panzer S1, the Tor M1-2U, the S400, and the Tiger Gibka, if I pronounced that correctly. Support your operations with helicopters such as the Ka-50 Black Shark, which is the predecessor to the Ka-52. It's basically a single-seat version of the Ka-52, but aside from that, I expect it to be fairly similar. The Ka-60, which is an aircraft that is... I'm going to say this is kind of like a Black Hawk equivalent, because what it is it's an aircraft that looks a lot like this, but I think it's larger. It has a seating capacity, if memory serves, of I think around 14, and an internal cargo capacity of 2 metric tons, and an external cargo capacity of 2.5 metric tons. Now, I don't think those figures are additive. I think it's either one or the other. But I still expect this to be a relatively light transport helicopter. And the Mi-8 AM TSH-VN. Now, of the various Mi-8s in the game, you have the Mi-8 AN TSH, but the VN version specifically is, near as I can tell, a dedicated gunship. So, similar to how... If I'm not mistaken, it's basically a Russian equivalent of the DAP. At least if I'm not mistaken. It fits in that same role as a gunship slash troop transport. Now, exactly how that's special when it comes to Russian helicopters is yet to be seen, because you can make an argument that a number of Russian helicopters already fit in the gunship but troop transport role, or the troop transport but gunship role for the various Mi-8 variants. Oh yeah, and there's this. That could also be counted. Flood the skies with the MiG-31BM, the MiG-31K, which is the variant that carries the Kinzhal, the KH-47M2, the Yak-130, a light 2-seat training aircraft that's also capable of light attack. I'm guessing it's going to be roughly equivalent to... where's Coastal? To this thing. While carefully managing assets such as the Tu-95, the AN-26, which is a light twin-engine prop transport aircraft roughly akin to the C-27J, and the stealthy S-70 Okhotnik. Yeah, I just bumped the microphone. Now, here's where things get interesting, because when people talk about the Okhotnik, the first thing that they're probably going to draw, the first thing that they're probably going to compare it to is the RQ-170. The thing is, the Okhotnik and the RQ-170, yes, they're both stealthy, or at least, I mean, the Okhotnik's supposed to be stealthy. Yes, it's not stealthy. Flying wing UAVs. However, when I think of the Okhotnik, the first thing that actually comes to my mind is the Reaper. Because the Okhotnik, firstly, is a large UAV. Like, the Sentinel is fairly small. Okay? The Okhotnik is big. It is much bigger. And, the Okhotnik is also capable of carrying ordnance. 2 500-kilogram, or 1,100 or 1,102 pound guided bombs. So, now, a drone with weapons isn't unusual. I mean, we have the Reaper, and the Reaper can carry roughly the same payload, albeit in the case of 4 500-pound bombs instead of 2 1,000-pound bombs. But the thing that, honestly, the part that interests me is whether or not the Okhotnik is going to be something like a large RQ-170 that can also carry bombs, or if it's going to be something like a remote-controlled version of the F-117. Because if it's like a remote-controlled version of the F-117, that would make it less useful. Well, I suppose that would really depend on whether or not it's in the air tab or the recon tab. I mean, I assume it's in the recon tab. I also don't know how stealthy it's going to be. The Russians, of all the pictures I have seen of the Ohotnik, none of them have a shielded engine exhaust. They're shielded engine exhaust nozzle, I mean. I think the Russians might have developed something like that for the Ohotnik, but I honestly do not know. And by shielded engine exhaust, I'm talking about something like this. Now, you can make an argument that it's not really going to affect stealth all that much, because yes, I know the F-35 doesn't really have one. But another aircraft that doesn't have one is the Su-57. And look at the stealth value this thing gets. So, I don't know what stealth value the Ohotnik is going to have. I would be a little surprised if they gave it a 1.75 stealth value, like the Sentinel. Unless they've also given it a shielded engine exhaust nozzle. Now, like I said, I think the Russians might have worked on one, but I honestly do not know. Anyway, we shall see. New battlefields, fight across 2 new locations designed for distinct tactical challenges. Okay, yeah, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. A dense urban combat across a strategic bomber city, so I'm expecting there's an airfield nearby. And then Coal Mountain, an elevated industrial stronghold where artillery positions dominate the battlefield. Okay, and now we have the actual pictures. And the first one is a Tu-95. Now, there's 2 things I note in this picture. First is that the Tu-95 appears to be loaded with 8 KH-101 cruise missiles, which is something that it can carry in real life. Well, the later versions. What is the Tu-95 MBM or something like that? Secondly, I note that it appears to be dropping an FAB-9000. At least what I think is an FAB-9000. Yeah, itchy. That might be an FAB-3000, but I'm not sure which. Now, this leads me to believe that the Tu-95 is going to be kind of like the B-2 in that, or not the B-2, the B-52 in that you'll have pylon weapons, and then you'll have an internal bomb bay. So, honestly, if they're going to make the Tu-95 like the B-2, then I have long held the belief that what they should do with the nuclear weapons in this game is they should remove the freefall bomb off of the Lancer, remove the nuclear cruise missile off the Tu-160, give the Tu-160 the nuclear freefall bomb, and then give the B-52 and the Tu-95 when it inevitably comes to the game a nuclear cruise missile. And what you do is you give the nuclear freefall bomb to the aircraft that either has the stealth, the B-2, or the speed, the Tu-90 or the Tu-160, I mean, to allow it to better penetrate air defenses. Meanwhile, you give the nuclear-tipped standoff cruise missile to the aircraft that have the radar cross-section of an apartment building and are about as fast as molasses rolling downhill in January, being the B-52 and the Tu-95. They're probably not going to do that, which means that if, and this is a load-bearing if this spec has a nuclear weapon, it's probably going to be on the on the MiG-31, the MiG-31P. I think is it P? K. The MiG-31K, I am stupid, and the Kinzel. Now, I'm just going to preface this. Neither nuclear weapons nor the KH-47M2 have been mentioned anywhere in this article. At all. So, they may not be coming. Although, if the MiG-31K is coming, then it's a safe bet that the KH-47M2 is also coming. Especially since, in some of the other articles, they actually have just straight up shown the KH-47M2. Let me... At least if I'm not mistaken, they have. Oh yeah, it was on the Discord. It wasn't here. Anyway, I digress. So... Anyway, what I was getting at was that if this specialization is going to have a nuclear weapon, it's probably going to be on the KH-47M2. Now, I have seen some screenshots that were supposed to be from very early testing of the spec that appear, at the very least, to imply that the KH-47M2 is not going to be interceptable by air defenses. Now, I believe this was for the nuclear version specifically, or at least the screenshot is. I don't know if this applies to the conventional version only, the nuclear version only, or both. What I do know is that I am not a fan of this. This honestly concerns me. And it concerns me for two reasons. The first is a gameplay reason. The second is a real-life reason. And I'm going to explain the second first. And this, the second reason is just simply the fact that's not how air defenses work. And okay, yeah, sure, there's a lot in this game that can be labeled under that's not how air defenses work. The fact that you could just bring in a random launcher without the radar, without the control station, without the generators, and have it function very much falls under the category of that's not how air defenses work. But the way air defense works is that you do not need to catch up to something. You don't need to outrun it, you just need to get in its way. So, it does not matter how fast a KH-47M2 is moving. As long as you get in its way, you're going to kill it. And I know this thing has been vaunted as this unstoppable hypersonic superweapon. It's not. Honestly, it's not. It is the upper half of an Iskander that has been strapped to a MiG-31 that has gone through a modification process that, in order to accept the KH-47, has basically removed its ability to be used as a interceptor like the platform was designed in the first place. It is just the upper half of an Iskander, and Patriot in Ukraine has smoked Iskanders and Kinzels multiple times. I mean, heck, back in May of 2023, Patriot smoked 6 Iskanders in a single engagement. Or not Iskanders. Smoked 6 Kinzels in a single engagement. So, they can very much be intercepted. And... okay, let's do some math. I need a calculator. Now, the speed of sound is approximately, I'm going to say it's 762 miles an hour. Generally, it fluctuates between 761 and 767. Actually, no, let's use 767 times 12. Nope. 12. 9,204. Okay, cool. 9,204 divided by 60 is 153.4. That is 153.4 miles in 1 minute. Now, divide that by 60. That's 2.5 miles a second. Okay. The range on a Patriot's radar is officially 100 miles. And which means that the Patriot is going to see it when it is 100 miles away. Now, 2.55, well, okay, let's round that up to 2.56. 2.56, no, let's 100 divided by 2.56 equals just a hair over 39 seconds. So that Patriot battery is going to have 39 seconds between seeing that Kinzel incoming in between seeing the Kinzel incoming and the Kinzel actually reaching the Patriot battery or whatever it's whatever it is co-located with that it's trying to protect. 39 seconds. Look, I'm not an air defender, but I'm pretty sure that is enough time for that Patriot battery to smoke that Kinzel 4 times over. That is assuming it's moving at Mach 12. And it's not moving at Mach 12. It's moving at maybe Mach 3.5 in its terminal phase. That is according to data collected by the Ukrainians who were actively shooting these things down. So yes, it very much can be intercepted. Now that I've got the real life reason why I don't particularly care for, or why I don't particularly like the idea that the Kinzel can't be intercepted, let me give you the gameplay reason. And this, between the two, is far more important. Simply put, it is an I win button with no counter. Or I say no counter, with no counter play. It is an I win button that has no counterplay. For a game that bills itself as a competitive multiplayer experience, an I win button with no counterplay is not good. So, I mean, I shouldn't need to explain that it's not good. Anyone who's familiar with it should automatically understand that that's just what everyone's going to use. If you can't counter it, it's going to be kind of overpowered. And we just saw how badly they sledgehammered the Booker, and the Booker deserved it because the Booker was overpowered. If this can't be intercepted, it's going to be basically the same thing. Now, in those screenshots, apparently the MiG-31K with the Kinzel would cost, or the nuclear-tipped Kinzel, would cost 1,125 points instead of 1,000 points, like every other nuclear weapons carrier in the game. Which would make it the single most expensive unit, but let's be honest here, if you've gathered 1,100 points, it's not going to be hard for you to gather another 125. So, now, I say all this, I'm not saying that it will be uninterceptable by air defenses. I'm not saying that. We don't know that. This article does not mention the Kinzel at all, much less that it's even going to have a nuclear-tipped variant, much less whether or not any of them are going to be immune to interception by air defenses. We don't know that. I'm just saying that because that's what I have seen on screenshots that are months old. And I do not think making the Kinzel immune to interception is a good idea. We shall see if the developers agree with me or not when the DLC comes out. Anyway, next we have a Yak-130. Like I said, this is a light training aircraft, or a training aircraft that can also be used as a light attack aircraft, something akin to the Albatross over in Baltic. And it appears to be equipped, at least if the the weapons on the far side are the same as the weapons on the near side, with a pair of bombs, a pair of S-25 rockets, and a pair of what I believe are R-60 air-to-air missiles. But this is only ever going to be a light attack aircraft. Oh, and it also appears to have a gun pod. I just noticed. But this is likely only going to be a ground attack aircraft. I mean, you could carry some light anti-aircraft weapons like the short-range air-to-air missiles seen here, but you're probably not going to you're not really going to be able to use this thing in air-to-air combat. Which, I mean, is fairly realistic, because at time of recording, one of these got bodied over Tehran by a F-35 a couple months ago. So, I fully expect to see that exact same thing happen in-game, if you try and use this with, or as a fighter aircraft. And then we have the Pantsir S1, which is just the wheeled version of the Pantsir, and the Kamaz Tor M12U, which is just a wheeled version of the Tor. For that matter, go to mech. Where is the Tunguska? There is the Tunguska. Pantsir S1. So they have the same name. Okay. Anyway. Now, okay, the name's not exactly the same, but it's still, they're both called Pantsir S1. Now, I had a thought when I was looking at this picture. Because the way things are phrased, like, the way it looks in this picture and the way it's phrased in the way it's phrased, the way it's phrased down here is, it implies that the Pantsir S1 and the Tor M12U are going to be separate units. But are they actually going to be separate units? Because the chassis that you can see looks very similar between the two. So, is it actually going to be separate units, or is it going to be something like in Coastal with the Tor M2DT that you can swap out with the Pantsir SA? So, I would like a bit more clarification on that. But we do not have that thus far. Anyway. It seems to imply that they're going to be separate units, but again, I don't know. Honestly, I'm kind of leaning towards the Pantsir S1 being an upgrade over the Tor, because that would make more sense rather than having two high-end shore-head systems in a single spec. Which, I mean, to be fair, that's not necessarily unusual, because you could point out Striker Cav having both the MML and the M shore-head, and depending on just exactly how many hairs you want to split, the SEARAM, SEARAM, all in a single spec. Or you can argue the Tor in Guards Tank Battalion alongside the I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, this stupid thing with the weird long name that no one knows how to say. However, personally, I'm leaning towards the ability to upgrade the Tor into the Pantsir, but again, we shall see. Okay, so this next one's kind of fun. Truthfully, I had never seen or heard of this thing prior to seeing the screenshot. When I first saw it, my first thought was that kind of looks like the Tunguska. Because these boxes here with the tubes and then the solid section remind me of the boxes on the it reminds me of this on the Tunguska. So I was thinking, well, is this some sort of heavily armored anti-aircraft platform? And it's not. This is actually the predecessor to the BMPT Terminator. Now, the development for what would ultimately become the Terminator goes all the way back to the 1980s and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where the Soviets learned that infantry firing down on vehicles from a high elevation, like in mountains, were a bit of a problem to deal with. Even vehicles like the BMP-2, which could elevate the autocannon up pretty high, were having a lot of trouble dealing with them. So they started a program to try and develop a vehicle to remedy the problem. This is ultimately, eventually, where the BMPT came from. And in fact, they used a number of interim options, one of which can actually be seen in-game, and that is the ZSU-23-4 M2 without the radar and with extra ammunition. This was a version designed for use in Afghanistan, specifically because the anti-aircraft guns could elevate so high. However, you then had the First Chechen War and the Soviets getting their butts kicked in Grozny, which consisted once again of infantry firing down on armored vehicles from elevated positions, this time in buildings and on rooftops, and that really just drove the point home. So the Soviets, well, I say Soviets, at this point it's the Russians, started developing several vehicles to try and address this problem. Then you had different... To my knowledge, there's 3 prototypes: the Object 781, the Object 782, and the Object 787. And the Object 787 was the one that performed the best out of the 3. Now, this next part I'm getting from a Google search, so take it with a grain of salt. However, in 1997, the program was abruptly canceled because the company that produced the Object 787, and what I could only assume to be a sudden and massive attack of stupid, decided to take classified footage of the vehicle in action during its trials and post it on national television. Suffice to say, the Russians were not happy. And this ultimately led to the program being canceled in, again, 1997. Now, they continued, or at least the Object 787 being canceled in 1997. The only surviving vehicle, to my knowledge, the only surviving vehicle is currently in Kublinka Tank Museum over in Russia. But that's what this thing is. It's a T-72A chassis, which makes sense because the T-72A is also in this specialization, with a new turret, 2 2A72 autocannons. It's supposed to have two 50 caliber machine guns. I'm only seeing one here, and these are pods for S-8 rockets. Now, as the actual usefulness of this, I'm not entirely sure, because the S-8 is... Well, the S-8 is kind of small, especially since you're only going to get 12 of them. mind you, a helicopter rocket pod carries 20. And generally, the helicopter brings those in pairs. So I don't expect this thing to be all that expensive, but it is rather interesting. I will concede that. And then lastly, we have Spetsnaz Alpha. And like I said, I expect these guys to be the equivalent to Delta, as in the door kickers. That appears to be the loadout that they have here, with the heavy armor, the grenade launchers, the suppressed weapons, and including this guy and this guy both appear to have bullpup rifles with particularly large magazines. Now, the Russians have, and this is actually used by the FSB, the Russians have developed a large caliber rifle that shoots a 12.7 by 55 cartridge. And it's called specifically the 12.7 by 55 STS-130. And it is designed for the SHAK SHAK-12 bullpup battle rifle. And apparently can also be used in a Sodden Great Big Revolver, because apparently the Russians aren't subtle. And I just pulled up a picture of a SHAK-12, and that looks exactly like the weapons that this guy and these guys are carrying. Now, there are some problems with the cartridge. While it's a large cartridge, yes, the muzzle velocity is slow. Very slow. And the effective range is listed at most of 300 meters. So I'm expecting this thing to pretty much be the equivalent to something like the Mark 18 CQBR or the HK416 here. I'm expecting it to be something akin to this. Either this or this. Anyway, so that's basically the upcoming spec, and that's what they've released about it so far. In general, I am interested. I am not going to lie. I am interested. I'll probably be playing at least the new scenarios when it comes out. I thought it was going to come with a campaign, but it doesn't say anything about that. So I guess we shall see whether or not that comes. I also think it's worth showing these off, because this was from a post in May 21st, and it includes some pictures of some of the DLC units. I suspect this is basically going to be a recon vehicle, mainly because you have this optical mast here. I have looked at these pictures beforehand, so you also have an ATGM carrier with what honestly looks like a rather jury-rigged add-on armor package, but I don't know. That's just my thoughts seeing it. It looks like we're gonna have the same options as on the Cornet D1, where you either have the Cornet M's and the optical system, or just the regular Cornets with whatever this is. Although I suppose they might be Cornet M's. We have the Tiger Gibka, which just appears to be 4 Iglas on a mast. It kind of looks like it has radar, but I honestly don't know. We then have this, which is a large 6-wheel transport, which can either go for a 14.5mm machine gun or a 23mm autocannon. So that should be interesting. I note that it doesn't have any Iglas, but it does have the box that the autocannons mount to the sight system. So something like, where's VDV? Something like this. Okay, now this one annoys me. You have the T72A and the T72AV. I don't know which variant is which, but you remember when I said that I've never seen the Object 787 before? This thing, back here. I completely missed this. The funny thing is, I know I made a video on this patch, and I guess I'll have to go back and rewatch the video, but I don't think I noticed this at all. And then we have the 9K58 comma, which I'm guessing is this one, mainly because the launcher reminds me of a Smirch. And the 9K515 Sarma, apparently, which I'm guessing is this one. The Uragon was known as the 512, if memory serves. And then we have another variant of the Tiger, which I'm guessing is just like your basic light infantry transport. Anyway. Yeah, 9K512. So I wonder if the 515 is going to be an upgrade of the Uragon rather than a upgrade of the comma. Anyway, I don't know. We will see. We will see. So go away. Anyway, I am interested to see what the Russian spec contains, if I'm going to be entirely honest. So I'll be making videos about it when it comes out. I think that's a given. I don't know how many videos I'm gonna make. I don't think I'm gonna make 10 different videos of the scenarios the way I did with the Welcome to Katika scenario. But I think I'll be making videos of it when it comes out. Anyway,